Hey friends, I am back after a longer than expected break. And if you are new to this podcast, I do invite you to subscribe and share with your friends on your favorite social media groups and on your favorite social media outlets. In this episode, I've already stuttered, so we've got that out of the way. I've got Pat Gilbert, and he is the author of the book Passion is a Fashion, The Real Story of the Clash. And he is back in a major, revised 50th anniversary edition, and it is the essential biography of the band that detonated onto the London scene in 1976 and reshaped modern music. So tell us a little bit about, well, first of all, Patrick or Pat, introduce yourself and then tell us a little bit about the book.
Yeah. My name's Pat Gilbert, and first of all, Big Al, thank you very much for having me on your podcast. It's a great honour. So, cheers to that. Yes, I work by day at Mojo Magazine, the music magazine in London, and I've been doing that for since about 1998. So that's what I've been doing.
So let me get to the next question here. Well, this to tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, the book began life in the late 90s because when I've been writing about music for about 10 years by that point. And then when I got a job at Mojo, it gave me, which is kind of like the Rolling Stone used to be and the cream of the American music press. But so in the UK, Mojo gave me access to a lot of artists that perhaps I couldn't have talked to before. And the Clash weren't really doing too much at that point. But I managed to get Paul Simon. Paul Simon was my, over there smashing the bass, was my kind of boyhood hero. And I got to talk to him about his art. He was, painting at the time. And gradually I infiltrated my way into the kind of Clash camp. And I did a series of articles for Mojo on the Clash. And after Joe Strummer died in 2002, that was the point where I thought, well, I'm going to kind of bring these all together, and then I'm going to go and interview as many people as I possibly could to make the book. And the book finally came out in 2004. So over 20 years ago. And it's had a jolly good spring clean. And a lot of the interviews that I've done with the band subsequently, I've kind of put in, and there's expanded chapters on like the White Riot tour, their first national tour, and when they went to New York to record Sandinista, their fourth album, and Jamaica, and so on. So it's bigger and better.
Well, how many chapters are in the book?
Oh lordy, probably about not enough. Some might say, but some might, I don't know, 12. I think 12, and then an aftermath. So it starts with the story of each of the band members and me meeting them face to face, and then it talks about their story, and then it kind of then the whole punk thing happens, and the band comes together, and then it goes on. And yes, unfortunately, the Clash story finished when Joe died in 2002. But but their legacy is huge. Far more. They were kind of a punk band. They weren't like Green Day, and they weren't like Rancid. They didn't sell like 10 million, 20 million albums. They sold, their biggest selling record was their last one, Combat Rock, or the last one with the classic lineup, should I say? And it sold around 1 million copies. But their impact on the world was absolutely huge, and it still reverberates now, I think.
So you had mentioned that you had interviewed the guy and kind of did the seeds to the book. So did you approach a publisher to produce this book, or did a publisher actually come to you and say, "Hey, since you've done all that, can you put a book together?"
Uh, I can't remember. I think I think somebody possibly came to me or the publisher Aurum about writing something else, and I said, look, why don't I do a Clash book instead? That was right. They wanted me to write a Joe Strummer book. And I said, I don't really want to write a Joe Strummer book. It was sort of too soon after his death, I thought. But I said, I'd love to write something about the Clash as a band. Because you have four times as much fun. Because more than that. Because the four members of the classic lineup, which was Joe Strummer, Mick Jones, Paul Simon, and Topper Headon, they were such extraordinary people themselves, and got up to all sorts of mischief. That I thought that would be a much better story. And I think I've talked to everyone who was ever officially in the Clash, because they had a second life at the end of their career between 1983 and 1980, at the end of 1985, where they had a slightly different lineup. But yeah, I think I've talked to everyone apart from one guy who was in that very last lineup.
So, when you originally started writing the book, how long did it take you to get from creative idea to finished product?
I'd already written, I'd done for Mojo, I'd written a kind of 15,000 word history of the band. And I thought, well, hang on a minute, that's kind of an eighth of the book. So I thought, well, if I could just chop it up into segments and think, well, could I write another whole chapter around those bits? I thought, yeah, that's not going to be too hard. So it grew. It grew out of one really big article, I guess, and then I just I just chopped it down into um, the story of each member, then the punk thing, and then their first album, and so on. And it came quite easily, I must say. Yeah.
And then when you decided, or the publisher decided, I'm not sure how this is going to go, but when it was decided that you were going to do a 50th anniversary edition and expand it, how long did that take?
That's a good one, because I came out of lockdown, and the book had a very light kind of freshen up around 2009. And so it kind of, whenever I picked up a copy, I thought, well, that's not right. And I know a lot more about that kind of episode than I did when I wrote the book. And it was kind of written, the original one, pre the internet as we know it. So I was able to fact check stuff. Some of the chronology was slightly out in the first iteration. So when it came out of lockdown, I got in touch with the publishers and said, look, can I do a new version, just because I'd like to. And I was, yes, and I was given a modest advance to redo it. And then they said, well, hang on a minute, let's just wait until the 50th anniversary of punk, and then there'll be a bit more of a kind of frisson around the whole thing. So here we are. Yeah.
Very good. As you were as you were researching and interviewing people for the revised and updated edition, did you come across anything that surprised you?
Uh, yes, yeah, a few things. There was a character called the Baker, who was one of their road crew. They had a very, very tight knit family, the Clash, and probably no more than 7 or 8 people all together. And one of them was the Baker, and I'd done subsequent interviews with him, so that was quite interesting, getting his perspective on stuff. And it wasn't really shocking revelations. It was just kind of really good stories about the Clash. Kind of existed in this chaotic atmosphere. It was always falling apart. They were always at loggerheads with their record company. They were always at loggerheads with themselves some of the time. So Baker gave another little kind of window into all the chaos that surrounded the band.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Which band member do you consider to be the driving force behind the shift from punk rock roots to more experimental genres?
Good question, Big Al. I think that's it.
Actually, we got to give Jeff Humphrey from A to Z Radio credit for that question.
Okay, well, Jeff, good one. Um, when you drill down into it, I think Mick Jones, the guitarist and chief kind of music maker, was always going to be in a rock band. Didn't have to be a punk band. He was always going to wanted a life to be as a musician and working in a band. Joe Strummer, who's a lyricist and main singer, I guess he was always going to be a Bob Dylan poet, strumming a guitar forever, his whole life. Paul Simonon, he was a painter who took up the bass because he thought, it's all going to be, this thing could be quite exciting. And then Topper was always going to be a great drummer. He was always going to be, if he hadn't have been in the Clash, he would have been a great session drummer, or he would have joined another big band, I'm sure. So one of the things when I was writing the book, I was very conscious that it wasn't like they were a band formed just to be a punk band. I think it was an opportunity that was there, and it very much chimed with what they were doing, the street radical thing, the politics thing, that they were all edgy characters in themselves. But I think it's quite clear that they could have always gone on to make albums that were more musically sophisticated, and especially their big thing, of course, was bringing militant reggae music into rock music, into sort of punk music. And having done that successfully on the first album, I think they weren't ever going to give that up. And then when they went to America, America's a big thing. Maybe it wasn't one person in the band. Maybe it was them going to America, which was the engine that thought, wow, we love all this rock and roll stuff. We love all this R&B stuff. We love soul music. So they kind of put that all into the cooking pot, and out came London Calling, I guess, their third album.
Well, I do find it fascinating. You've got the British bands that are influenced by, blues and roots music and stuff. And then you've got the American bands who are influenced by the British bands who were influenced by the blues and the roots music.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, it was kind of, I think it's been, if you look back on the history of music since Elvis, it's kind of like being a bit of a ping pong match between, the Americans started it with the blues and jazz and rock and roll, and then I guess the Beatles absorbed some of that and took it back to America, and then it went back again in the 70s with the 70s rock thing, and I think the Clash sort of batted it back again to America. So yeah, so it's always been I mean, the Clash loved America. I mean, they absolutely loved America. They made their first, well, they made their second, fourth, and fifth albums in America. So there was a point for us Brits where we thought they'd kind of left us behind, behind, and gone to live over with you guys, but they hadn't. But they spent a lot of time over there, and a lot of the culture that they absorbed from the newspapers and the issues being discussed over there, particularly the Vietnam stuff, that really kind of fed into what they did.
right on. Is there anything about the book that I didn't ask that you would like to bring up?
Um, yeah, I think there's a lot of things about it. I think there's a lot of testimony in there because the first edition came out back in 2004. A lot of the key players are sadly no longer with us. So when I was revising it, I was very conscious, when I look back, that I was managed, and some of these people didn't do many interviews when they were alive at all, and probably nothing quite as substantial as they did with me for the book. So I've preserved their testimonies, and I think that's kind of that's for me a very kind of important thing, because nobody can interview those guys and gals again, and I think there's probably a dozen key players in the book who are no longer with us. Them, managers and producers and stuff. Sandy Pearlman, the America the Blue Oyster Cult producer and mentor who recorded their second album. He's gone. Bill Price, who was their sort of chief engineer, he's no longer with us. Guy Stevens, who was the slightly nutty um, um, force of nature who London Calling, he's no longer with us. So it's become, the book has I think become quite a historical document in its own right. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Tell my audience where they can find this book and any other material that you have written.
Okay. Well, the Mojo archive isn't available, sadly, but I guess old copies of Mojo. I've yet to anthologize all my writing into one place, which would be a good thing to do. But yes, if you want to get passion as a fashion, Amazon, all the big online music stores will have a copy. World of Books, that sort of stuff. And it's going, and as it's released in quarto, it should be in all good bookshops in your big cities.
All right, Patrick. Well, I thank you for your time, and I hope that this book does really well for you.
Big Al, thank you very much, and
Have
thank you
a
for talking to me.
have a great day.
And you.
Thanks for listening to Big Al's Rockin' Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe on your preferred podcast outlet. Visit BigAlRocks.com to find past episodes, on-demand links to my radio show, links to my social media, and other Big Al shenanigans. Most importantly, please like and share this episode. Peace out.